Hey guys, today we're going to talk about junior ISAs and investing for children. There's so much information out there, it can be difficult knowing where to start. So my goal with this video is to make the most useful and detailed guide on junior ISAs, cutting out a lot of the waffle with a straight to the point guide with exactly what you need to know. So you can take a look at all the different factors and decide which account is best for you. I'm going to do a comparison of all the cash junior ISAs as well as the stocks and shares junior ISAs. With each, I'm going to give you some key considerations to decide whether they're the right account for you. So make sure you stick around for those because I think they're really important. This was a highly requested video and I was quite hesitant in making it because it's not something every subscriber is interested in watching, so it might not do very well. So if you are watching this video and you are interested, if you could drop a like, that will help me so much because it will help the channel grow and show me that all the effort I put into these videos is worthwhile doing. And if you want to have and make more money, subscribe to the channel because there'll be plenty of tips and tricks on how to do just that. Now let's dive into junior ISAs, and here's some key considerations you need to know about junior ISAs before you open one up. So a junior ISA lets you contribute £9,000 to a savings account for your child every year, and it's completely tax-free. Your child has to be under 18 to open an account. Now until the age of 16, you'll be in complete control of the account. It's only at 16 the child does have the choice to take control of the account themselves, if they're capable of doing so, but they still can't take the money out until they're 18. None of the money can be taken out until they hit the age of 18, but anyone can contribute to it. So people like grandparents, uncles, aunties, whoever it is, or friends can contribute to the ISA. You can also have a cash junior ISA and a stocks and shares junior ISA at the same time, as long as the limit doesn't go over £9,000. Each year that limit refreshes when the new tax year comes, so you can add more money to it. And that's the basics of what you need to know. So let me just tell you about this ISA guide. Now I've done the ISA guide in a comparison type format because I think it's way more useful to see them all side by side, rather than you have to skip through a long video where you're looking at one after another after another. If you see them side by side, it's easier to make a clear decision on who's the winner. And it's also really important for me to say that I'm not endorsed by any of these companies, so the review is completely unbiased and I'm not paid or don't make anything off the back of it, which I think makes the comparison much more fair. But just before we dive in, let me just mention there's a few people who haven't made the cut. So for example, TSB, Barclays and Lloyds haven't made the cut because they were all at 1%. Skipton was slightly better at 2% and Santander was all the way at 0.75%, so I haven't included those. I've just included the companies which offer the best rates. So let's first jump into cash junior ISAs and take a look at the comparison table. So for the purpose of these videos, these are the companies that I'm going to be reviewing. So the first broker is going to be Bath Building Society, then we've got Darlington Building Society, Dudley Building Society, The Family, Coventry Building Society and Tesco Bank. Now the reason there's not a lot of big providers in here is the rates just aren't that good. So some of the smaller building societies have jumped on board, offer a better rate because they can pull customers in. And by doing that, they want you to buy their other products to make more money that way. So you might be more familiar with some of these companies than others. But in general, it doesn't matter too much. They all pretty much offer the same sort of service. So it might not matter if they're not a local branch to you. So the first thing we're going to look at is, can you transfer an existing junior ISA into these? And luckily, they all offer that ability. So that's not something you want to worry about. Now the next thing to think about is, can you transfer in child trusts? Now a child trust was something that was in play before a junior ISA really came about. So anyone that was under 18, born before January 2011, would have had a child trust created for them automatically by the government. If you don't fall into that criteria, it doesn't really matter. The rates of those now can be quite low, so they tend to be much lower than a junior cash ISA. So you are going to want to transfer across if you do have one of those accounts. So if you were looking to do that, the only one you're able to do that with is Coventry. But it doesn't really matter too much because you're probably able, wherever you are at the moment, to transfer yours into a junior ISA, then you just transfer the junior ISA into the new company, so it doesn't really matter. Now the next thing we're going to look at is where you open the accounts. Now I don't think this really matters too much, but it is a technicality. So Bath Building Society, you can open one by post and in branch. Now with some of these, you're not going to be able to open it in branch if it's not local to you. I've not got a Bath Building Society near me. If you don't really live in the area, there's probably not going to be a branch that's close to you. Darlington Building Society is the same, it's by post and the branch. Dudley's the same, post and by branch. The Family, the same again, post and by branch. Now this is where it starts to get different. Now with the Coventry, you're able to open it online, over the phone, by post or pop into branch, which is really useful. If you like to do everything online over the phone, it might be easier for you. And Tesco Bank also offers the same thing. You can open it online or over the phone. Now with opening some of these accounts, it doesn't really matter too much because you're only going to do it the once. So I wouldn't really worry too much about the method of opening the account. It's just going to be a case of printing off some forms and sending them in the post. And they're probably going to want a copy of some important documents as well, maybe like a passport for the child, etc. Now this is where it might get more interesting. So the next thing we're going to look at is where you manage the account. So with Bath Building Society, again, right through to the family, it's only in the post or in branch. So if you don't have one local to you, it might not be efficient for you. Coventry Building Society, on the other hand, you can do it by phone, which I don't really think adds much of a benefit. Yes, you can ring up and check the balance, but I don't really think that's very important. And I think with the others, even if you rang up and asked, they'd probably just tell you the information too. Tesco, on the other hand, do offer you the ability to go online and check your balance, which is something that a lot of people might favour. But I do think overall with these kinds of accounts, it's more of a set and forget. So you're going to set up the once, pay a set amount into the account, and then not really worry until the next year when you see what the balance is. Okay, I'll put some more in, I have to transfer it, etc. So I wouldn't really worry too much about how you access it. But if you are worried, you could go for something like Tesco Bank. So just reviewing the categories so far, in terms of the child trusts and being able to transfer in, Coventry is the winner. In terms of access, just because they do have the functionality to do it online, I have to give that to Tesco. Now the next thing we're going to look at, which is probably the most important thing after all, is the interest they pay on the account. Now there isn't an awful lot in this. They are kind of guided by government guidelines, what inflation's like, interest's like, to kind of generate these kinds of rates. So they aren't fantastic, but they are something, and they're generally much better than adult accounts, so it's worth looking at. So Bath Building Society offers 2.5%, Darlington 2.5% again, Dudley 2.5% again, The Family 2.4%, Coventry 2.25% and Tesco 2.25%. So in terms of a winner for that category, we have to go with either Darlington or Bath. But of course, it's kind of only 0.25%, so it doesn't really matter. So you might want to go with a company that does allow online access and sacrifice 0.25%. It's not really too bad. Now the next category is how the interest is paid, and it's pretty much all paid annually, except for Tesco Bank, who pay it on the anniversary. So that's the anniversary 12 months from when you open the account. So they're all very similar in that kind of way. The next one is the FCSC protection, which is up to £85,000, and that's across the board. All of these companies are regulated. They're all big banks. They've all got the regulations, so your money is secure. And then we move on to the age of access, which of course is 18 for all of these accounts. There's no way to access the money before you are 18. Now let's move on to my notes. So there are some extra things to consider with some of these accounts. So with Bath Building Society, there's an extra form to fill in if you want to transfer in an existing account. Darlington doesn't have anything, it's pretty straightforward and there's no extra forms. Now with the Dudley Building Society, in order to get this 2.25%, you have to have a minimum of $2,500 in the account. So that could play a factor if you're not wanting to put too much money in. And the family has the extra form to transfer in, and it requires a minimum of £3,000 in the account to get the 2.4%. Now for me, I don't really like these minimums. I just want a set interest. I don't want to worry about that sort of thing. So out of all of these options, the winner for me has to be Darlington Building Society. They offer the highest interest rate, and really everything else is pretty much the same across the board, and there's less effort and it's easier to set up. Now this is where it gets really interesting and something that's worth looking at. And the question is it worth opening a cash junior ISA? And the answer is, it's probably not. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that kids are now taxed in the same way as adults, which sounds crazy, but it's actually not. So children are now actually taxed on their income. So they have an allowance of up to £18,500 per year. That's made up of your £12,500 personal allowance, £5,000 starting savings allowance, and your £1,000 personal savings allowance. The breakdown isn't really worth thinking about. The general idea is kids are still taxed the same way and they don't really have income in the first place. So it doesn't really matter. So in that case, if you're looking to hold cash, you're probably much better off with a child savings account. For example, if we take a look at this one from Halifax, the Kids Monthly Saver, you can earn 3.5% fixed for 12 months. So you're already getting an extra 1% every year and you're not going to pay tax on it anyway. And the benefit of this is you'll still have access to the money. With the ISA, it is locked away until you're 18. So that's something to consider. If you're going to hold cash, you're much better off with these kinds of accounts. So there's only 4 main reasons you would use a junior ISA. The first being you want to lock the cash away until they're 18. Now for some people, especially if you struggle at saving, it might be quite good because it doesn't give you that temptation of spending the money. The second reason is because you want all money to be tax-free. So if you do build up a large amount within there, it's going to be much better having it all tax-free in the first place. And of course, what happens when they're 18 is there's that benefit to swap the account into a normal stocks and shares ISA, a cash ISA or a lifetime ISA. So it's worth bearing that in mind. And when it gets to that point, if they want to then save and keep building and building, it's all going to be within a tax-free wrap, which I think is really appealing. The third reason would be if junior ISAs paid much more than a cash. But as I've just showed you, the kid's regular saver earns more than a cash ISA. Now let's talk about the fourth option, which I think far outweighs the benefits of a cash ISA, which is a junior stocks and shares ISA, which is what I would recommend and the type of account that I would open myself. So before I jump into my comparison of stocks and shares junior ISAs, let me mention that I haven't mentioned a couple of companies, which I think a lot of people might wonder why. So I haven't mentioned Nutmeg, Moneybox or Wealthify. Now these are classified as kind of robo-investors that kind of do it all for you. Now with all of these kinds of accounts, they will all help you in some way. So if you go for a regular stocks and shares ISA, for example, all these companies, big companies, will help you make the investments. So although these guys claim to be helping you in so many ways, so do all of the other companies. But the main two reasons I don't like them, the fees tend to be more and the returns just aren't as good. I would much prefer you to have a normal stocks and shares ISA and do it that way, because I think you'll get much better returns for your money. So let's dive into my comparison of the stocks and shares ISA and see which is best. Now for the purpose of this comparison, there's going to be a couple of companies missing. As I just mentioned, there's a few missing there, but there's also going to be missing your free trade and your trading 212, because unfortunately they don't offer a junior stocks and shares ISA. So the companies I'm going to be looking at today are Fidelity, Vanguard, AJ Bell, Hargreaves Lansdown and Interactive Investor. Now I'm sure you're pretty familiar with at least 4 out of 5 of those. So let's dive in and talk about what's best. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the ongoing fees. Now that's the ongoing fees for your account being open on that platform. So Fidelity here are actually amazing. They charge no fee for the account. Obviously they're trying to make up the money in other areas, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So Fidelity have no fee on the account. Vanguard are in with their standard 0.15% up to a max of £375. So that will really just depend on how much you've got in the account. It could work out to be way too expensive. For the majority of people, I don't think it will. AJ Bell offers 0.25% up to a max of £30. Hargreaves Lansdown is 0.45 up to a £45, and that's annual charge. Now Interactive Investor on the other hand are more expensive, but if you do already have an account, they will give you this account for free. So they're trying to lure you into the $9.99 account per month. If you already have that, it might work out cheaper to go for a junior ISA there. So in that category, it's clear that Fidelity has to be the winner. Now moving on to the amount of shares and funds available that you can buy on the platform. Now Fidelity isn't particularly clear, they just say that you can choose from thousands of funds and shares. So for this example, I can't exactly say the specific number how many they have. Vanguard have a choice of 70 different funds, and at this stage I have to mention that you can buy Vanguard within these other accounts. So if you're really interested in a Vanguard fund, you could buy it on Fidelity, Hargreaves Lansdown, AJ Bell. It doesn't really matter. So don't worry about that too much, because I know the Vanguard funds are very popular and I really like them. AJ Bell offer 2,000 funds, Hargreaves Lansdown 10,500, Interactive Investor 40,000. So for this one, I'm going to have to go with Interactive Investor because they do have 40,000. But to be honest, I don't think you're really going to struggle on any of these platforms. Yes, you might think the numbers are much better, but in reality, you're not going to buy some of these tiny little companies that they might have. They might have loads of small, tiny companies, and ideally, that's not what you're going to look for within a junior stocks and shares ISA. You're probably going to look for an ETF that you can deposit into, you're going to hold for a long period of time and get good returns. So I don't think you would struggle with any of these accounts. Now let's move on to the dealing fee. So the dealing fee is how much it costs you to buy a share. So with Fidelity, it's £10 to buy a share, but if you set up a regular saver, it goes right down to £1.50. And that's what you'll see with a lot of these. Vanguard have got their standard fund fee, which is 0.06 to 2.64, depending on which fund you go for. But it is kind of an unfair comparison. If you wanted to buy a fund within any of these providers, you would pay additional fees. So I wouldn't worry about that one too much. But again, I want to stress you do have less flexibility with a Vanguard because you can't buy other companies except for what's on their platform. AJ Bell is £1.50 for a regular saver or $9.95 per trade. Hargreaves Lansdown is a bit more expensive, £11.95, or it's £1.50 again with a regular saver. Free trade give you 1 free a month, or it is $7.99. Now really, I wouldn't worry too much about the fees. With any of these, you're going to probably set up a regular saver, so you can have a regular amount that you save every month that just goes into the account. Just a kind of set and forget approach to saving for your child. So out of these, I would have to choose AJ Bell in terms of the fees, just because it's slightly cheaper, but it is only by 5p, so it doesn't really matter. Now the next thing to look at is the FX fee. An FX fee is the foreign exchange fees on the account. So if you wanted to buy a share overseas, you pay a set fee for buying it. So Fidelity have got 1 to 1.75%, That scales depending on the amount of money that you are putting into the trade. Vanguard don't have it because you're just buying their funds. AJ Bell is 1% on under £10,000. Hargreaves Lansdown again scales with the amount that you put in, and that's between 1 and 2%. Interactive investors just have a fixed fee of 1.5% again. Again, you're probably just going to buy into a fund with this account, set and forget, so you don't need to worry too much about the FX fees unless you're going to be really active and trading on a regular basis. Now, in terms of the interface and how easy the app is to use, I've had a go hands-on with all of these. Fidelity, I really like that one, I've given it a 7 out of 10. Vanguard is a bit dated for me, so that's got a 5 out of 10. AJ Bell is even more dated, so that's got 4 out of 10. Hargreaves Lansdown, 8 out of 10 because it's got a really nice user interface and app. Interactive Investor, again, isn't the best user experience, that's got a 5 out of 10. So out of all of these on user interface and design, I would go 8 out of 10. Now to me, user interface is quite important. Now that might just be my background in design and me always working on web and online and wanting something that's easy to use. For you, it might not matter too much, and especially if you're not checking the account that often. Now the next thing that's important to mention is FCA compliant. So all of these companies are FCA compliant and they're massive companies. So in terms of the company age, you've got Fidelity 45 years, Vanguard 45 years, AJ Bell 26, Hargreaves 40 years, and Interactive Investor at 25 years as well. So you haven't got to worry with any of these companies. And if you're really interested, the funds they manage, Fidelity have got 4.9 trillion, Vanguard 6.2 trillion, AJ Bell 120 billion, Hargreaves 86 billion, and Interactive Investor 45 billion. So these companies manage so much money and they have so much money invested. They're so secure and it's nothing to worry about. I'm not recommending any tiny companies that could go bust. So this is where it gets quite difficult in deciding who you want to go for. For me, looking at all of these, I would either go for Hargreaves Lansdown or Fidelity, just because they're both really easy to use and the fees aren't insane. I would be tempted with something like Free Trade or Trading 212 if they offer the service, but they just don't. And actually, if you're looking to leave something for 18 years, these companies have been around for so long that really they're a safe bet. So I would say Fidelity or Hargreaves Lansdown, you can't go wrong with either of those. So looking at all the stats, they're the companies that I would recommend. So obviously with stocks and shares junior ISAs, the younger your child is and the earlier you start, the better. That's how compound interest works. You're going to get that percent, add on a regular basis, and they'll have a huge lump sum by the end of it. And the fees don't really change with these big platforms. So you're not going to have the hassle of a cash junior ISA where you're looking to change it every year because the fees have dropped, you're making less money, and you need to keep swapping and changing the accounts. So with stocks and shares ISA, you can really have that set and forget approach, buy some really good companies, leave it, and keep investing on a regular basis. And you might already be in the position where you get an awful rate and you're looking for a better option. In this case, the stocks and share ISA is going to be for you. So I would recommend to buy a solid fund or ETF like an S&P 500 tracker or a FTSE tracker. Just leave it and add to it on a regular basis. And over a period of time, you'll end up with a great lump sum at the end. So let's talk about, is a junior stocks and shares ISA worth it? So let me throw a spanner in the works. So the first thing you need to consider is, are you going to need access to the money? And how good a saver are you? For example, if you're not very good at saving and you're thinking, I'm going to spend this money, then really locking it away for 18 years isn't an awful option. But you do need to think, if the worst happened, I know it's not the place you want to go to take money, but if you desperately needed that money, someone was sick and you needed an operation, then you might desperately need access to that money. And you won't have access to that money until the child is 18, so that's worth thinking about. And the other thing I want to mention, which could drop a bomb on you, and before you kill me, I don't mean to say that your child would do it, but if they do turn 18 and then they decide they want to go on a 2-year bender to Ibiza, they can use that money to do it. They can take the junior ISA and basically do what they want with the money. Now, hopefully they won't do that and they'll use it towards a house or a car or whatever it is they really need, and they'll use it in a sensible way, but it's something that's well worth thinking about. And it might not be the way that you want to give your child money. You might want to have the money in your own account and then give them a set amount. So what might be worth thinking about is, if you're not using all of your allowance for the year, maybe you can save some money for your child within your own account. Take a portion of that, mention what you've saved, and look at the interest and do it that way. That way you've got complete access to the money whenever you need it, and you can give it as and when they need it. Now, just to drop another bomb on you, which might be crazy, but it's worth thinking about. If you did take that approach and you were married and you got separated, there's no saying that that money was for the child. So your partner would have access to that money, which God forbid that won't happen, but it's worth considering. If it's in a junior ISA and it's in your child's name, it's completely theirs. And it couldn't be considered in the divorce, unless you were sneakily putting money into the child's name to avoid your partner getting it. Then it could be taken. But apart from that, it can't be considered a split property. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's worth thinking about if it did happen in the future, because you never know what the future holds and what position you're going to be in. Now, since I'm super obsessed with ISAs, let me tell you what I would do. If it was me, I would open a cash savings account for my child, like the kids' monthly saver that we mentioned about. Maybe not the monthly saver, but I would look for a good saving rate for my child. And I would do this so when they have some money, I would teach them how to save. So I'd show them the balance and say, okay, let's save some of this money and do that on a regular basis. So I'm going to encourage saving from a really young age. I would also open a junior stocks and shares ISA, contribute a certain amount to that every month. Maybe not a crazy amount of money, but I put some money in just so they've got something to help them out when they hit 18. And I would also build up my own stocks and shares ISA, so I've got money building it up in that account. Not that I'm dedicating to the child straight away, but if they get to that point where they need a house, I've got money available to help them, and I can put it to the specific cause that I think's worthwhile. So I can put money towards a house and say, here's 20 grand towards a deposit if I've got that much. Not think, oh my god, they're going to blow the money and do something crazy with it. So I would use a balance of the 3 accounts and do it that way. Although your approach might be different, it completely depends on your circumstances. If you haven't already got your own stocks and shares ISA, check out my comparison on that. Or I do use a company called Free Trade. There's a link down below and you get a free share. That's a company I'm going with, but take a look at the comparison because it might help you make up your own mind. So if you found this video useful, please drop a like because it will help me out so much, and subscribe, and I'll give you some more advice about what to buy within your accounts, which are the best funds, which you should be buying, and if something changes with these accounts, I will let you guys know. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.